I used to believe that marriage was built on love, respect, and understanding. I thought Dominic and I were solid, that no matter how busy life got, we'd always find our way back to each other. But I was wrong, because in a single night, with just a few careless words, my husband shattered the illusion I had been desperately holding on to. "You don't even like that place anyway." That was all he said, casual, dismissive, as if my feelings, didn't even matter. It started so innocently. A simple question, really. "Hey, Dominic," I had said, setting my phone down, looking at him across the living room. "How about we go to La Vie tonight? It's been a while since we had a date night." For a second, just a fleeting second, I saw something in his eyes. Hesitation, guilt. I couldn't tell. Then it was gone, replaced by indifference as he turned his gaze back to his laptop screen. He didn't even look at me when he spoke. "That place? You don't even like it anyway." I felt the words hit before I could even process them. A dull ache settled in my chest, but I forced a small smile. "Since when?" "We used to love going there." Dominic sighed, rubbing his temple, clearly annoyed that I had the audacity to press the issue. "You always complain about the dim lighting and the chairs. They're too stiff. It's not your favorite." I blinked. Was that really his excuse? I searched his face, hoping, praying for something. Anything that told me he still saw me, that he still cared. But he had already moved on, his fingers typing away on his keyboard, the conversation nothing more than a passing inconvenience to him. Something inside me cracked. Was this what we had become? Two people existing in the same space, barely acknowledging each other? I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded slowly. "You're right." And that was it. No argument, no discussion, just nothing. Later that night, I curled up in bed, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach, the feeling that I was losing him. Then my screen lit up with a message from my friend Melissa. "Melissa, thought you were staying in tonight?" My brows furrowed. "Me? Yeah, why?" A few seconds passed, 3 little dots danced on the screen. Then, "Melissa, because I just saw Dominic at La Vie." My breath caught in my throat. I read the message again. Dominic, at La Vie, the restaurant he so easily dismissed, the place he said I didn't even like. A sudden nauseating wave of unease settled in my stomach. "Me. Are you sure?" Melissa responded almost immediately. "Melissa. Yeah, he's sitting in the corner, not alone." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Not alone. I stared at those words, my grip on the phone tightening. My hands felt ice cold, yet my skin burned with a sick combination of confusion and something much worse, dread. A million possibilities rushed through my mind, each one more painful than the last. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe it was just a casual meetup with a friend. But deep down, I knew. Still, I needed to see it in black and white. My fingers trembled as I typed my next message. Me. Who is he with? I waited. It felt like hours, but it was only seconds before the reply came in. Melissa? His assistant, Jessica. My stomach dropped. Jessica. I knew exactly who she was. Young, ambitious, always lingering just a little too close to Dominic during company events, always laughing just a little too hard at his jokes, always looking at him with an expression I recognized. A sharp, bitter taste filled my mouth. I had asked him for a date night. I had suggested our restaurant, and he had shut me down without a second thought, then turned around and taken her there. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. I could have called him right then and there, demanded an explanation, but something inside me shifted. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want an excuse. I wanted something else. I wanted him to feel what I was feeling. Slowly, I set my phone down, exhaled deeply, and whispered to myself, "All right, Dominic. You want to play this game? Let's play." I don't know how long I sat there staring at my phone, rereading Melissa's message over and over again. His assistant. Jessica? 2 simple words, but they hit like a wrecking ball, shattering whatever remained of my trust in Dominic. A strange numbness settled over me. My fingers were ice cold, yet my face felt hot, like all the blood in my body had rushed to my head at once. My ears were ringing. My throat felt tight, as if I had swallowed something sharp and it refused to go down. I should have been crying. I should have felt my heart breaking. But all I felt was emptiness. Slowly, I placed my phone down on the nightstand, my hands trembling slightly. I swallowed hard and took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe it was purely business. Maybe... I shook my head. Number, I knew better than that. Deep down, in the quiet corners of my heart where truth resided, I knew what was happening. This wasn't about a random business dinner. This wasn't about work. It was about something much worse. I stood up slowly, wrapping my arms around myself as I walked toward the bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like a stranger. Her eyes were tired, dull. Her shoulders slightly slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight she had grown too accustomed to. When had I started looking like this? When had I started feeling small? I used to be confident. I used to have a spark, a presence, a voice that mattered. But somewhere along the way, I had shrunk myself down. I had become quiet, accommodating. I had let Dominic's dismissiveness, his cold indifference, mold me into someone who tiptoed around his moods, who settled for breadcrumbs of attention. And now? Now he was out enjoying a meal at our favorite restaurant with someone else. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. I pressed my fingers against my temples, willing myself to stay calm. I wouldn't cry. I refused to cry. Instead, I forced myself to remember all the nights I had waited up for him, dinner growing cold on the table while he sent just one more email, to remember the times I had tried to talk to him about my day, only to be met with distracted nods and half-hearted hums, to remember the way his eyes used to light up when he saw me, how that light had long since faded, and now I was boring. I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. That's what he thought, wasn't it? That I wasn't exciting anymore, that I wasn't enough. A slow, icy determination settled in my bones. I had spent so much time wondering what I had done wrong, but now I realized I wasn't the problem. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone again, my fingers steady this time. I clicked on Melissa's message. Me. Is he still there? A few moments passed before she replied. Melissa. Yeah, corner table by the window. They just ordered dessert. I clenched my jaw. Dessert. Dominic never ordered dessert when we went out together. He always said he was watching his sugar intake. But with her? With Jessica? I closed my eyes for a second, letting the anger wash over me, letting it settle into something stronger. I wasn't going to sit here curled up in bed, waiting for him to come home with his half-truths and excuses. Number I was going to do something about this. I took another deep breath and smoothed down my shirt. Then I made a call. Not to Dominic, not to Melissa, but to someone who would make sure this night ended in a way my husband would never forget. I smiled to myself as the phone rang. Hey, it's me. What are you doing tonight? I could feel it, the shift inside me. It was subtle, like the first quiet rumble before a storm. A few minutes ago, I had been sitting in bed, drowning in a mixture of disbelief, anger, and hurt. But now something had snapped into place. I wasn't going to sit here and cry. I wasn't going to call Dominic and demand an explanation, only to be met with lies and half-hearted excuses. Number I was going to do something about it. As the phone rang, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My heart was pounding, but not out of fear. Out of something else, anticipation, After a few rings, a smooth, familiar voice answered. "Well, well, I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight." I let out a soft chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "I wasn't expecting to make this call either. Is everything okay?" I hesitated. The truth was, no. Nothing was okay. My marriage was crumbling, my husband was at a restaurant with another woman, and I was on the verge of making a decision I couldn't take back. But instead of saying any of that, I simply said, "I need a favor." There was a brief pause on the other end, then a quiet chuckle. "Now, this sounds interesting. Tell me more." I glanced at my reflection in the mirror again, this time with a new sense of clarity. "How fast can you meet me at La Vie?" 20 minutes later, I stood outside the restaurant, the cool night air biting at my skin. The soft glow of the sign above the entrance illuminated the sidewalk, and through the large glass windows, I could see the intimate, candlelit tables inside. I spotted them immediately. Dominic and Jessica sat at a cozy little corner table by the window, the same table where he and I used to sit. They were leaning in close, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight. He was smiling, actually smiling, in a way he hadn't with me in months. Something inside me twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't here to cry. I wasn't here to cause a scene. I was here to make a statement. Just then, I heard footsteps approaching behind me. "You look stunning." I turned to see him, Mr. Lancaster. Tall, confident, effortlessly powerful. One of Dominic's biggest clients, the kind of man who could make or break careers with a single decision. And right now, he was my dinner date. I smiled up at him, adjusting the strap of my dress. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." He smirked. "When a beautiful woman calls me for dinner, how could I possibly say no?" I laughed softly, looping my arm through his. "Shall we?" We stepped inside, the soft hum of conversation filling the air. The host greeted us warmly, leading us toward our table. But I had no interest in our table. I was focused on them, and then it happened. Just as we passed Dominic's table, I saw him glance up, probably out of habit, and the moment his eyes landed on me, he froze. His hand, which had been casually resting on the table, tensed. His jaw clenched. Jessica noticed his change in demeanor and followed his gaze. Her expression shifted from relaxed to suddenly aware. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge him. I simply smiled, lightly squeezing Mr. Lancaster's arm as we walked past, and as we took our seats, I could feel Dominic's eyes burning into me. Good. Let him watch. Let him wonder. Let him feel what I had felt. I reached for my glass of wine, took a slow sip, and exhaled. This was only the beginning. I could feel his eyes on me. Even as I took my seat across from Mr. Lancaster, even as I sipped my wine with an effortless smile, I could feel the weight of Dominic's stare burning into me. Good. I wanted him to watch. I wanted him to feel the same cold, gut-wrenching realization I had felt when I saw Melissa's message. I wanted him to sit there, across from her, and wonder what was happening, what he had missed, what was slipping through his fingers, because for the first time in a long time I was the mystery, and Dominic hated not being in control. Mr. Lancaster gave me an easy smile, swirling his drink in his hand. "You know, I was surprised when you called me. We haven't seen each other since the gala." I tilted my head slightly, the candlelight casting soft shadows across the table. I figured it was time to catch up. He smirked knowingly, glancing briefly at the other tables before lowering his voice. "I take it your husband has no idea we're here?" I let out a soft chuckle, stirring my drink with slow, deliberate movements. "Oh, I think he knows now." Mr. Lancaster followed my gaze just as Dominic shifted in his seat. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers were tapping against the table, a telltale sign that he was seething. Jessica, on the other hand, looked stiff, uncomfortable. I wondered if she was starting to piece things together. Dominic had dismissed me, underestimated me. But tonight I was reminding him exactly who I was. And then it happened. I saw the exact moment Dominic couldn't take it anymore. He leaned forward, saying something low to Jessica, something that made her shift awkwardly in her chair, before abruptly standing up. I didn't turn my head. I didn't react. I just calmly reached for my fork, twirling a bite of my pasta as if I hadn't noticed the storm brewing behind me. But then, is this some kind of joke? His voice cut through the restaurant's soft murmur like a knife. I took my time chewing, dabbing the corner of my mouth with my napkin before finally looking up. And there he was, Dominic, standing at the edge of my table, arms crossed, tension radiating off of him in waves. His expression was tight, his lips pressed into a thin line. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Excuse me," he scoffed, his eyes flicking to Mr. Lancaster, who to his credit looked completely unfazed, before settling back on me. "You don't even like this place," Dominic muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "You said the chairs were too stiff." I let out a soft laugh, setting my glass down with a quiet clink. "Oh, you're right," I mused, meeting his gaze head on. "I did say that." I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping just enough that only he could hear. "But Mr. Lancaster loves it here." Dominic's jaw tightened. I could see the realization sinking in, the way the pieces were falling into place in his mind. I wasn't here by accident. I wasn't here to cry or plead for an explanation. I was here to send a message, and he got it, loud and clear, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "What are you trying to do?" I smiled, tilting my glass toward him in a mock toast. "Oh, I'm just having dinner." His nostrils flared. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say more, maybe cause a scene, maybe demand answers. But Dominic wasn't stupid. He wasn't about to make a spectacle of himself in front of someone like Mr. Lancaster. So instead, he clenched his jaw, shooting me one last lingering glare before turning on his heel and walking away. As he stormed back to his table, I saw Jessica shift uncomfortably in her chair, clearly unsure of what had just happened. But Dominic didn't explain. He just sat down, stiff and silent, staring at his untouched plate. I exhaled slowly, my grip on my glass finally relaxing. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, all I felt was closure. Because in that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need Dominic's attention anymore. I didn't need his approval. I was done playing the role of the neglected wife, waiting for scraps of affection. Tonight, I had taken back my power, and judging by the look on Dominic's face, he knew it too. I sat there swirling the last sip of wine in my glass, watching Dominic as he sat stiffly across from Jessica. He wasn't eating. He wasn't talking. He was just sitting there, his grip tight around his utensils, his jaw clenched so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. Good. I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. Mr. Lancaster leaned in slightly, his voice low but amused. "I think you just ruined his night." I smirked, lifting my glass in a small toast. That was the idea. I felt Dominic's eyes on me again, the frustration practically radiating off of him. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to me, the version of me who no longer waited for his attention, who no longer begged for his time, and I could tell it bothered him. Jessica, on the other hand, looked downright miserable. She shifted in her seat, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, clearly aware that the dynamic at their table had shifted. She wasn't the center of Dominic's focus anymore. I was. And that's when I knew I had already won. I wasn't here for revenge. I wasn't here to humiliate him in public or scream accusations across the restaurant. I was here to show him, to make him feel what I had felt for months. Ignored, unimportant, replaceable. And judging by the way he was barely touching his food, his shoulders tense, his jaw tight, it was working. Mr. Lancaster glanced at his watch and sighed. As much as I'd love to stay and watch this unfold, I have an early meeting tomorrow." He tossed his napkin onto the table and shot me a knowing smile. "But we should do this again. Soon." I smiled, setting my glass down. "Absolutely." He stood up, straightening his blazer, and I followed his lead, grabbing my purse. And just as I turned to leave, I felt it. The shift in the air, the inevitability of what was coming next. Because Dominic, who had been sitting there, stewing in silence, had finally snapped. "Wait." His voice cut through the restaurant, firm and demanding, just as I took my first step toward the exit. I paused, glancing over my shoulder. Slowly, I turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "Yes?" He stood up, his movements tense and deliberate. He was trying to mask his frustration, but I could see it. The way his fingers twitched slightly, the way his nostrils flared just the tiniest bit. "Can we talk?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it. Jessica looked between us, her expression unreadable. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Talk about what?" Dominic exhaled sharply, glancing at Mr. Lancaster, then back at me. "Alone." I tapped my fingers against my purse, pretending to think about it. Then I shrugged. "I don't see what there is to talk about." His eyes darkened. "Don't do that." "Do what?" He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "You're making a scene." I arched an eyebrow. "Oh? You mean like when you made a scene in our living room earlier, dismissing me like I was an afterthought?" His jaw tightened. He didn't like being thrown off balance. I took a slow step closer, lowering my voice just enough that only he could hear. "You didn't want to go to dinner with me, Dominic," I said softly, my tone laced with something cold, something final. "You said I didn't even like this place." I let the words sink in, let them hang between us. Then I smiled. "You were right. I don't like this place. But what I do like..." I gestured around the restaurant, my voice carrying just a little more now, "is the look on your face right now." I watched as something flickered in his eyes. Anger, regret, realization, but it was too late. I wasn't his quiet, passive wife anymore. I wasn't waiting for him to remember I existed. I was done. He took a small step forward, lowering his voice. "Are you trying to prove a point?" I smiled again, but this time it wasn't the soft, loving smile he had once known. It was the kind of smile you give someone right before you walk away. "No, Dominic," I murmured. "I already did." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit, not bothering to look back. I didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, I knew my worth, and I was finally ready to walk away. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, the crisp night air filling my lungs like the first breath of freedom. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking in Dominic's shadow. I was walking away from it. As I reached the sidewalk, Mr. Lancaster gave me a small smirk. "Well, that was fascinating." I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head. "I hope I didn't drag you into too much drama." He laughed. "Are you kidding? That was the most entertaining dinner I've had in years." I smiled, but this time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't hollow. It was real. And as I looked up at the sky, at the twinkling city lights stretching out before me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to Dominic, trying to make him see me, trying to matter to him. But tonight I finally understood something. I had been fighting for a place in a life where I no longer belonged, and that wasn't my failure. That was his. I got home later that night, kicking off my heels and exhaling deeply. The house was quiet, eerily so. It felt different, like the weight of years spent waiting, hoping, and hurting had finally lifted. I ran my fingers along the edge of the kitchen counter, my mind drifting back to all the nights I had stood in this exact spot, reheating dinner for a husband who barely noticed if I was there. Not anymore. Not ever again. I had just set my purse down when the front door opened. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. Then, finally, "You really think that was necessary?" His voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it I could hear the frustration, the disbelief. I turned slowly, meeting Dominic's gaze. He looked different. Not smug, not dismissive, just uncertain. And wasn't that ironic? I had spent months feeling invisible, questioning everything, and now he was the one questioning where he stood. I crossed my arms. "You tell me, Dominic, was it necessary to dismiss me, to lie to me?" His jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Wasn't it?" I could see the battle playing out in his mind, the way he wanted to defend himself, justify his actions. But for once, he had no words, and I wasn't about to give him any. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom. Behind me, he let out a slow breath. "So that's it?" His voice was quieter now, almost unsure. "You're just done?" I paused, gripping the edge of the doorway. For a split second, the past flashed before me. Our wedding day, our late-night talks, the laughter we used to share. I had loved him. I had given him everything, and he had taken it for granted. I looked over my shoulder, meeting his gaze one last time. "I was done a long time ago, Dominic," I said softly. "I just didn't realize it until tonight." And with that, I walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind me. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains, warming my skin. For the first time in months, I didn't feel heavy. I didn't wake up wondering if today would be the day Dominic finally saw me, finally chose me, because I had already chosen myself. I got out of bed, stretching my arms, feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't know what was next. Maybe I'd take a trip somewhere. Maybe I'd go back to school. Maybe I'd start over completely. But whatever it was, it would be mine. No more waiting, no more hoping, just living. And as I stepped into the morning light, I smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I was free. Sometimes, walking away isn't the hardest part. Realizing when it's time to leave is. So tell me, have you ever stayed in a situation longer than you should have? What finally made you realize it was time to choose yourself? Let's talk in the comments. I'd love to hear your story.